Right. Thank you very much. Have you muted Beth?
I am, yes. Have now.
Thank you. In our room. Tonight I thought I'd give you a little bit of a history and geography lesson. Hopefully on your screen you should have a picture of Nowra and with the Shoalhaven River, Shoalhaven Heads. Can everyone see that? Oh, okay, you're all muted, so I can only assume that you can see it. Tonight I want to tell you a little bit about the Woolley family. In 1852, grandfather or grandparents, James Ashton Woolley and Anne Woolley, left Manchester with 4 children, actually sailing from Liverpool to come to Geelong. They were on a ship with 34 people and plus the crew. And they were 2 nights out onto the voyage and run into a Russian ship. The Russian ship sank and they had to turn around and go back to Ireland for 6 weeks while the ship was repaired. And consequently, 7 months later, they arrived in Australia. James had listed on his passport that he was a publican, and on the ship's manifest, a bookmaker. So he was probably somewhere between either an alcoholic or a gambler. James Aston had a son called James, and in 1869 they moved to the Shoalhaven area. And you'll notice on the map that I've dotted in 3 squares. One says Dad, which was the farm that my father was on. The next one was my grandfather, and
hang on a minute,
one of Dad's youngest brother.
Rob,
and
just
the other
a
farm
second.
Was
just a second. We can't see your screen. Can you, up the top where it says "Show my screen"? Can you click on that? It's the.
Sorry, it's gone.
Okay.
I'll escape it. Can you see it now?
That's it. You're back on, mate.
Okay, right. Well, I'll just backtrack to Greenville Point Road, coming out from Nowra towards the ocean. We were halfway to Greenville Point. Dad's farm there is marked with Dad. His father's farm, and eventually his much younger brother. There was about 20 years between. Dad was the oldest, and the youngest brother had the farm in the middle, and my uncle had the farm down the bottom. And the story behind those 3 farms is that when they came to Nowra, at that stage the whole of the land was controlled by Alexander Berry and Edward Wollstonecraft, and Berry was fairly senior and well recognised by the government of the day, and managed to get control of 40,000 acres in that area. Now, 40,000 acres would have been all the prime land there was in the Shoalhaven area. And so basically they controlled it, and there seemed to be some reference to that they could basically get 100 acres for every convict that they took. Now, I can't imagine that they had 4,000 convicts because there was only about 300 or 400 people in the area at the time. But they set up at Coolangatta. For those that know where Coolangatta is, particularly where it would be where number 6 is on the map, and that was the original homestead, and it still is a very elaborate motel, entertainment complex there, which was originally built by David Berry, who was the son of Alexander Berry. When they started releasing the land in the Shoalhaven, my grandfather, or my great-grandfather, decided that the land was too dear, that if he waited a bit, then there'd be farmers that would go broke, and that he would get in and buy the land up when it became cheaper. And so consequently they bought, the first lot of land they bought was the plot that Dad eventually went on to, and that was farmed by 2 brothers. They would have had about 60 to 70 acres each, and I would assume that they both had separate dairies. They were both separate farms at that stage, and I think they would have milked about 20 cows by hand twice a day. So it was fairly labour intensive, or very labour intensive, because this, we're talking about round about between 1860 and 1880. In 1880, my grandfather was born, and I knew my grandfather quite well. He was probably, I was certainly in close into my well into my teenage years before he passed away. They said we were married. Well, so out of my teenage years. And my father was born in 1909, and Dad basically lived in that on his farm until he was probably close on 70 years of age, when my generation of farmers, out of my father had 2 boys, the next brother had 1 boy, and the youngest brother had 4 sons. So out of 7 boys, my eldest brother decided that he'd stay on the farm, and he stayed for 17 years before he decided that he'd had enough of getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning and getting in for tea at 6 o'clock at night. And if you were lucky, you got half a day off a fortnight. But it was, there were other compensations to it. My primary school was in Nowra. High school, I went to Newington College in Sydney. I wasn't the brightest student on the block, and my parents were firmly convinced the only thing I'd be able to do in life would be a dairy farmer. So I spent a couple of years on the farm. After 12 months, I decided I'd like to do something different, so I applied for a carpentry apprenticeship and couldn't get that, and 12 months later I'd try and be a motor mechanic. So back in those days, it was not as near as hard to actually get into a job. In 1960, I became an apprentice motor mechanic to Morehouse Machinery and Sons. For those that have been around Rotary for a long time, FO, or Frank Morehouse, was the managing director. He was a district governor, I believe, mid-80s, and I think when he was a district governor, it took in from something like Sutherland to the Victorian border to Narrandera. And when you consider the mode of transport and the roads that they had in those days, the travel time was horrendous to go and visit all the clubs and do your official visits. But he had 2 sons in the business, Arthur Morehouse and Owen Morehouse, both of them Rotarians, both of them long-term Rotarians. And last night we went down to Nowra to a farewell to another Rotarian who lived about 2 kilometres up the road from Dad, Colton Lamon. I'm sure Ross would probably know Colton, who did a lot of work in the district. After completing my apprenticeship with Morehouses, it was a very dry season. Things were fairly quiet in the workshop, and they asked me to become a salesperson. Sales and me don't go that well together, but I did spend 12 months and managed to increase my mechanic's salary by about 30% for the 12 months. But after that, I decided I wanted to get back onto the tools again. And I applied for a job with Shoalhaven City Council as a mechanic, and ultimately became I was studying electrician at that stage, moved into that area, became a leading hand. 10 years later, I applied for and was appointed the maintenance manager, or the manager of their maintenance operation, plus the purchasing of cars, etc. And I was probably one of the youngest people to hold that sort of position in any of the major councils. Shoalhaven City Council was the 5th largest council in capital expenditure in the state, so it was, and still is, regarded as one of the major councils. Towards the end of my time at Shoalhaven City Council, as a typical motor mechanic, I studied every post-trade course there was available, and decided that the only way forward was really to do an associate diploma in mechanical engineering, which meant riding a motorbike to Wollongong 2 nights a week to study. I did that for about 18 months, and then Housing and Construction and Shoalhaven City Council had an engineers exchange program. I became very friendly with one of the engineers that came down from Canberra, and he convinced me that I should apply for jobs in Canberra because Canberra was a great place to work. And when we talked about it, we decided that with 2 children that we probably, they both had the ability to go to university, and whether they had the drive was probably another thing, but they both had the ability, so we made that move in 1985 when I came Department of Housing and Construction in central office, having been in an operational role, moving into a desk job that was 8 to 5 days a week was extremely difficult. And I said to my boss, I said, look, there's a job going in the region, do you think I should apply for it? He said, well, you're bored out of your brains here and you're driving us all mad. I think you better get out before we kick you out. So, and I'm still good friends with Gordon. And so I applied for the job in the ACT region. I left Housing and Construction on the Friday afternoon. Over the weekend it became the ACT government. So when I arrived there was total confusion. No one really knew who they belonged to or what was happening or what was going on. But basically we became Total Care Industries, a government-owned corporation, and in that role I ended up looking after leasing and maintenance management for all vehicular fleets except buses within the ACT. 1999 I was made redundant, and thanks to Bruce Calder, who was a former member of the Rotary Club of Canberra City and Canberra Sundowners, I think they call themselves, took me under his wing and guided me, talked me through the process of being made redundant and finding something worthwhile to do with my life. He suggested that I would make a good fleet management consultant, which I had great doubts, but Bruce is quite as persuasive and a very clever person in being able to train and get people reorganised. So I spent the next 7 years consulting to the City of Sydney, Parramatta City Council, Wallandilly Shire Council, had major contracts with them, Action Buses, and most of the work that I did for them was reviewing maintenance practices, leasing practices, restructuring workshops, and driving down maintenance costs, which I enjoyed and had a great deal of success. I think one of the things I did learn that the more you charge, the more likely they were to implement what you told them. Our personal life, Beth gave a pretty good rundown a few weeks ago about our personal life, how we met, our family. So I won't run through that. Nothing's changed in our family. They're all still married, and the kids are only 3 weeks older. My parents were very active in the Uniting Church, Methodist Uniting Church, and both Beth and I were involved, well, before we met with Sunday school teaching, but after we met with youth groups, I was a lay preacher for quite a few years and involved with the property trust and most other aspects of the church. In 1970 I bought my first motorcycle and started a 44-year love affair with old bikes and cars, especially those made pre-1930. We currently own 10 bikes that are in going order and a couple of cars which quite a few of you have seen. In 1977 I joined the now Apex Club and enjoyed 7 years of serving the community before I reached the grand old age of 40 where they asked you to retire. One of the, I guess one of the outcomes of meeting Bruce Calder and him counselling and coaching me into a life after government, which was probably the most rewarding part of my working life, Bruce suggested that I might like to go along to a Rotary Club and to his Rotary Club and to meet some of the members. He said, you'll find that there are quite a few members that have got similar interests, and he said it can't be all bad for your future. And one of the first people I met was Guy Thurston, and the first contract I got to do some work was with Guy Thurston at Action Buses. So the Old Boy Network never goes astray. My Rotary career, most of you probably know that, but I'll just briefly, I was President of Canberra City in 05-06. I was an Assistant Governor from 2008 to 10, and DG in 11-12. I guess probably the other thing which consumed a reasonable amount of my time was when I went to enrol Mark, our son, at Cubs, see the chairman in those days, and Shoalhaven Sea Scouts had a very long waiting list. And I went and saw him, and he said, look, I'll take your son on board as long as you're president of the parents group. And I said, well, look, no, I couldn't take that on. But he said, well, either that or secretary. So I became secretary for a couple of years and then president. And then I became an assistant scout leader and was involved with scouts for about 7 years. Veteran Car Club, I've been involved with the car club movement for the last 40-odd years. Been actively involved with the Veteran Car Club, both the local one and nationally. I'm on the national executive for that. And so it helps to try and keep a balance between Rotary and other interests in life. I guess one of my guiding principles in that if I wasn't passionate about it, I didn't want to become involved with it. And I think that passion for whatever you do in life is important, that you can achieve great things when you're passionate about doing something. I guess the negative side of that is that sometimes my over-enthusiasm for things tends to probably get some people a bit annoyed, because when I get decided that I'd like to achieve something, I don't like having too many roadblocks put in the way. And that's about a précis of my life. Back to you, David.
Everyone's unmuted, so everyone goes.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Rob. That's great. Has anyone got any questions for Rob?
Rob, it's Bruce here.
Yes.
I actually went to school with Bruce Calder at Frankston High, and I also played a lot of baseball with him. He was a very keen baseballer. I don't know if he was playing with you, but yeah. So
He's a great guy.
It's a small world, isn't it? He is a great.
It is.
Yeah.
Rob, at one stage, it's Ross, at one stage we were going to contact Bruce, with regard to joining us. Do you think that'd be on the card sometime in the near future, please?
I think so.
I have, and he said that he'd look at it sometime, but he hasn't got back to me.
Right. Well, perhaps if we could push that at a later date, then that'd be great.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions of Rob? Rob, what did you pay for that that vehicle that you had, the Renault? I think it's a Renault, is it? What did you pay for that?
The blue one. Yeah, I paid $16,000 for that.
Wow.
In 1985.
And what's it worth now?
Probably 40.
Much as someone will pay.
Or if you don't want to sell, it's $1 more than someone's prepared to pay.
Yes. Yes, of course. It's great.
Did you restore it, Rob, or was it in pretty...
No, I've done a lot of mechanical work to it, but basically the body is as I bought it, although it did have a very narrow seat in it, and Beth and I were having trouble fitting in the seat, so we got a new seat made, which is about, I don't know, 200 mils wider than the original seat, so and it's much more, the other seat wasn't comfortable at all.
Right.
Rob, so your expertise is not in the panel side of it, it's in the mechanical side of it, obviously.
In the mechanical side, yes.
Okay.